Welcome to Brain Wellness, the podcast. I'm your host, Mandy NP. Each episode will bring you a new topic or interview related to brain health and wellness as part of my mission to help you on the path to a healthier, happier brain. So, let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Brain Wellness, the podcast. My guest today is Dr. Ashleigh Moreland. Dr. Ashleigh is a clinical psychotherapist with a PhD in neuroplasticity and founder of the Remind Institute, where she specializes in helping people rewire their brains for emotional well-being, resilience, and deeper connection. With over 2 decades of academic, clinical, and lived experience, Ash brings a unique blend of neuroscience, trauma-informed care, and practical tools that actually work because she's lived the journey herself. Her work spans into personal and professional development with a focus on creating emotionally and psychologically safe environments in homes, schools, and businesses so we can be wired to thrive, not just survive. I love that line. Through the Remind Institute's programs, Ash supports adults to create happy brains by resolving the root causes of stress, anxiety, trauma, and burnout, going far beyond surface level mindset work. She also works with parents to raise emotionally intelligent, self-regulated children so the adults of the future don't spend decades recovering from their childhoods, which I also love. Ash is passionate about making neuroscience simple, actionable, and empowering, helping people of all ages live with more clarity, connection, and calm. Long bio, but totally worth reading. Thank you so much, Ash, for being here today with me.
It's a pleasure. It sounds really good when someone else reads it.
I know, right? It's always kind of impressive to hear a little bit about yourself. So there you go.
Yeah, that's
All
right.
right.
We were just talking before we hit record about just the realities of life. And I just see myself as a mum and I'm in the trenches with kids and I'm doing all this stuff. And I think it's not until you zoom out and hear someone else say those things about who you are and what you're doing and how you're helping people. It gave me goosebumps actually. So
Yeah,
yeah.
awesome. Awesome. Well, it sounds like you're doing some amazing work, and I can't wait to kind of dig into all of that today. But my first question is always, tell me a little bit more about you and what kind of got you to where you are now. How'd you get to doing all of these phenomenal things?
Yeah, well, I left home when I was 16. I had major, major mental health issues, and was the kid trying to spend her adult life recovering from childhood. And so I knew that I was extremely dysfunctional, but I was a customer of the mental health system for over 20 years. I had the whole top drawer full of labels. I'd tried all the meds, I'd done all the traditional stuff. And the best that I kind of got was, well, we're just going to have to help you to manage your symptoms. And over time, I just kind of went, that was my lived experience. But then when I became a mum, my son experienced something wakes up in you, like as a mum. And it was like, have you ever seen the movie Taken with Liam Neeson?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
you know that moment where he's like, if it's money you want, I don't have that. But what I do have is a very particular set of skills. That was my moment. And when I realized that specialists in 3 states of our country could not help my child, but I knew with every cell of my body that it wasn't right what was happening and that there was an answer. There was a way for him to be supported and helped, but no one else had the answers. So that really unlocked something in me, like this mama bear instinct of going, I will not stop until I can help my child. And thankfully, the one thing that I did have was the ability to understand science and the ability to research because I had a PhD in neuroplasticity. And I was like, if you can go from this to this, that is neuroplasticity. That is maladaptive adaptation to some kind of stimulus. And I know that we can then reverse engineer this and go from this to this. And so, how? What is going on in him? And it was so my own lived experience gave me, I guess, that embodied understanding and experience of what it was like to live with like major, major mental illness. But it was my son's health journey that helped me to reconcile and join the dots of how to overcome that. Even though I didn't embark on it for me, I embarked on it for him. It was just that I was kind of the positive collateral damage of healing. I'm going, oh my gosh, this is the breakthrough. This is the thing. And so that's kind of how it landed. I was a university lecturer for 12 years. I've always, always been like that person who hyper focuses on things that I just want to know how we work. I want to know what makes us tick. I want to know how we operate and why we are the way we are. Because if we can understand why we are the way that we are, then we can reverse engineer how to become the way we want to be.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of how I landed here.
Yeah, that's the mama bear effect is a real thing. And I think
Yeah.
sometimes I think that's more, oh, and not sometimes, it's more powerful when we have to do something for our children or even just
Yeah.
anybody else in general than ourselves.
Mhm.
It's always so much easier to help somebody else,
It
but in the
is.
process, sometimes we do help ourselves. So that's,
Totally.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I look at it, I've got goosebumps right now because I look at it and go, you hear these stories of like superhuman strength, like people lifting a car or, stuff that just doesn't make sense. And I didn't lift a car, but how I managed to join the dots and I look at that and go, I'm intelligent, but I'm not that intelligent that I could have made that happen. So that was another thing that kind of like I had this vision once of stepping stones.
Mhm.
It was kind of like the stepping stones, there was no path, but as I took the step, the stone appeared just in time for my foot to land. And then I would take the next step and the stone would appear. And then I'd take the next step and the stone would appear. And that was like kind of how the journey unfolded because when I looked around, there was no path. There was no clear path of recovery for him or healing for me. But it was almost like this divinely timed intervention of the right evidence or the right loose thread or the right, like one person on one random forum that I've never seen before would appear on my feed. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a missing link. And I would just get this full body knowing that that was an important piece of this puzzle that I didn't know what the end point was going to look like.
Mhm.
It's so hard to describe, but
Mhm.
yeah,
Things happen for a reason sometimes, and things
totally.
fall into place when you least expect them to.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
I love what you said a little bit ago about the neuroplasticity, and I've always known about neuroplasticity, but it's always been in the healing phases, so trying to correct things. But I never thought about the fact that you can go from point A to point B backwards with
Yes,
neuroplasticity, but
it's
it's
called
so true.
maladaptive. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
So,
maladaptive. So after a stroke, for instance, or after injury, or after, if you lose your eyesight, your brain is always adapting
mhm,
and sometimes maladaptively to the environment or to the stimulus. And you see it in aging. Aging is maladaptive neuroplasticity.
mhm,
And so we can then leverage and exploit what we know about adaptive neuroplasticity to reverse that.
mhm.
So that's very exciting.
Yeah. So if you hadn't seen my any of my previous episodes before we did this recording, I had a brain injury a couple of years ago. I was in a car accident and had a TBI, and all of those things I'm trying to re still make some of those net connections whole
Yeah.
again to get back
Yeah.
to the proper neuroplasticity. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy how that happens.
It is. Absolutely it is. And I also think that I find it very fascinating that we look at neuroplasticity often from a structural perspective. So a lot of the thinking is kind of like, well, if that was what changed, then we need to change that back to be better.
Mhm,
But the brain is so amazing that we don't need to change it back. We just need to find new ways.
mhm.
And so I'm neurodivergent. And I work with mostly neurodivergent people, not by design, but just, I guess, by, divine design.
Magnetism.
And yeah, and something that I talk about is I call it my tongue theory, and how people come to me as adults and they will often say, I can't do that because I'm autistic, or I can't do that because of my ADHD, or I can't do that because of. And I use my tongue theory and I say, well, imagine you didn't have tongs. You had never seen tongs. You didn't know that tongs existed. And everyone else out there in the world had tongs, but you didn't. Are you going to say that that's your disability because you don't have tongs, or is it a diff ability? And so I call it a diff ability. It's a different ability. that doesn't mean to say I can't ever have steak or I can't cook sausages or I can't, do those things because I don't have tongs. It means that a superpower that I see in people like myself and in people who are wired differently is resourcefulness.
Mhm.
And there is this innate ability because they have had no choice but to adapt and find unique ways to solve problems. And so, how else could we flip steak if we didn't have tongs? We could use a fork, we could use our fingers, we could flip the pan. There's 100 different ways you could flip steak. And so just because that part of the brain works differently, or there's this one little difference, does not mean to say that we have to bend over and go, oh, well, I can't do that because my brain doesn't have that bit. People have cut out entire lobes of the brain and been able to regain function.
Mhm.
So that doesn't fly with me. And I don't allow myself. When I say that doesn't fly with me, I mean as much for myself, if not more for myself than clients. But we feel really strongly about what is your ideal, what would ideal function look, feel, and sound like for you? And based upon what we know about the nervous system, how can we support you to achieve that? How can we support you to live that as your reality? And it might look like using tweezers to flip steak, but we've got you there.
Mhm.
So that's exciting.
Yeah, I love that analogy. That's a really good way to describe that. Because people don't think about it that way. They're like they kind of get stuck on the fact that they don't have something or that they're different, and obviously they can't do things then because of it. But it's switching that can't into how can I find a different way? And I love that.
Yes. Yes. And do you know, this is a little bit off topic. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist among many other things, but I realized that the entire medical system uses hypnosis. They just don't know it. And so if you go to a doctor and they say, as if it's a finite thing, the fact that that doctor has authority and the fact that we place our trust in them because of their authority, and they say, well, you're ADHD, so you can't have healthy relationships, or you lack impulse control. We come into agreement with that without the critical reasoning because of their authority. And that's all hypnosis is. All hypnosis is a suggestion that bypasses critical reasoning. And so I look at that and go, we are all hypnotized. PTSD is a very good example. I have many clients come to me fully hypnotized that they will have PTSD for the rest of their life, that they can't overcome it, that it's not an easy fix because people of authority have told them that. And from a nervous system perspective, that is just not true. And it's actually very fast and very easy to overcome. But I have more challenge like coming up against resistance of people who have been hypnotized to think that that is their problem. They're going to have it forever. They can never overcome it, which has come from the, I guess, misunderstood medical industry. So it's this very interesting challenge.
Mhm. Yeah. And I heard the term neurospicy recently and I really like that. So I call myself neurospicy now. And I've always been under the belief
Yeah.
that I try to do things because people tell me that I can't anymore. So if somebody was to tell
Yeah.
me that I couldn't recover from my brain injury, I would just say, well, I'm going to do it anyway and prove you wrong. So
Yeah.
I recently ran a half marathon again after my injury because I wanted to prove that I could. So I did it.
Yeah.
Wasn't for anybody else's enjoyment except for myself, other than to say, you know what, you didn't think I could do that, and I did. So there's
Yeah, and that's a powerful journey because that journey of things that you're an overcomer. I
yeah.
can already tell that. The things that you've had to overcome in your life equips and empowers you to know that you've got that within you to overcome. And it might look different. It might have a different outcome. It might have a different journey. But the fact that you have that frame of reference of overcoming is so, so powerful.
Yeah, I wish I could copy paste that onto other people and say, okay, well, let's get you to that same point too. And I don't know that I can with everybody, but I think that kind of segues really well into the rest of our conversation on like the mental health part of neuroplasticity and kind of coming through this. I'm trying to bring us back to the original point that we were going to talk about, but I love where we were going to. So
Yeah, yeah,
um,
absolutely.
So kind of thinking about some of that hypnotizing from the medical system, why why is it so much that you think that the current approaches to mental health aren't so effective? Is it kind of that hypnotizing part that comes into play?
No, no, I think that that is a side effect maybe. But what I see is that as a neuroscientist, I got into this because I thought if we could just change the brain, we could fix everything.
Mm.
When you do human research, you realize that you can control for every single variable. You can do perfectly designed research where, as I said, you've controlled for everything. And by virtue of us being humans and by virtue of us being uniquely designed and created, you would have some people who respond, some people who don't respond, some people who go the opposite direction.
Mhm.
And I was always really intrigued by the fact that there were these non-responders. There were people who just had different, I guess, reactions to things. And so I was very curious about that. And where I landed was that if you Google the definition of mental, it says relating to the mind. And I just went in curiously because I mean, I was part of the same school where psychology lived when I was, a lecturer for 12 years. And the word mind and brain was always used interchangeably, like they were the same thing. But I sat there and I went, definition relating to the mind. Hypothetically, what if the mind and the brain were not the same? What's different? What could be different about them? Because I can see that the brain lights up here and now. That brain can't go forward to dinner tonight. That brain can't go back to your sixth birthday. That brain can't go back to the schoolyard where the kid said something mean. And now every single time someone says something mean to you, your brain lights up like a Christmas tree. What the heck? And then I started exploring. Again, it was one of those like pebble moments because all this stuff started coming my way about the mind and the soul and metaphysical stuff. And so that's when I started to understand that the mind and brain are very far from the same thing, but they're intricately related. And so the brain is physical, it exists in time and space. So your brain is inside your flesh meat suit right here, right now. My brain is right here, right now, which is so cool. We're at different actual clock times on different sides of the world, but we're still here and now. So it has the qualities, the physical characteristics of here and now. The mind doesn't. And the mind being metaphysical does not have those same characteristics or qualities. And so our mind can go into a future that has not even happened yet. And based on that imagined future, our brain in real time inside your head right now activates the multi systems of your body in real time, releasing chemicals, releasing peptides, increasing your heart rate, changing the blood flow of your whole body, sending blood to your legs and your arms, preparing you to fight and run from something that's not even real, either from your past or your future. And that is not taught in traditional mental health systems. It's not understood. Um, that's why I think that when we try and deal with mental health by just looking at the brain, we're trying to wave the smoke out of the air while leaving the fire happening in the background. So I think that's why we've got to look at the whole lot. We've got to look at the mind. We've got to understand how the mind influences the brain and activates the body and deal with all of it.
Yeah, yeah. I think our traditional, at least Western medicine that we see here in the US all the time, it's very siloed. Everything
Yes.
is in its little place, and pulmonologists deal with the lungs, and neurologists deal with the brain, and cardiologists deal with the heart. Everybody does their thing, but people
Yeah.
don't really look at the big picture. And I will say too that even in my practice prior to my injury, I didn't really understand how it all went together because it wasn't
Yeah.
really taught that way either. It wasn't until having my own injury and having to do the research to figure out how everything was really affected that I realized that our brain controls our hormones in our body. Those are
Yeah.
connected. Our brain
Yeah.
controls our nervous system, which those are connected. All it
Mhm.
affects your muscles, it affects your joints, it affects everything that the blood, that your spinal fluid can reach, that your blood can reach. It
Mhm.
all is interconnected with the brain.
And your immune system
Yeah.
and your
Yep.
endocrines, like everything.
Yeah. So you can't deal with it in a silo. Just like with a physical trauma, emotional traumas are the same thing. They can
Mhm.
affect everything in the body. So sometimes people experience a lot of physical symptoms, even though they're trying to push down all these emotional things from that trauma.
Yeah, 100%. And I think even the understanding of what emotions are is generally very poor because people think that emotions are just a feeling. Like, I feel sad because I'm crying, or I feel angry because I am wanting to punch things. But it's not just that. I remember this was one of the pebbles that came. It was the book Molecules of Emotion by Candace Pert. Have you ever read that?
No.
Oh my gosh, it's an amazing book. But that started me on, that opened up a door for me to understanding that emotions are not just a feeling, they're the chemicals. And there are chemicals that get released in response to all of the things that, all the experiences that we have. And then because I think a lot about childhood and about how we as parents respond to our children and what that teaches them, but not only what it teaches them, about what it metabolizes and allows in the body. And so when a toddler is feeling a big emotion, there's all those chemicals of adrenaline and cortisol and noradrenaline going through their body. So I look at that and go, intuitively, before the world comes and like infiltrates that child's mind to say that that's naughty, that's bad, you shouldn't do that, what do they intuitively do to metabolize those chemicals? They're going to stomp their feet. They're going to throw themselves on the ground. They're going to punch things. They're going to throw things. They're going to cry. They're going to scream. They're going to do all of these big somatic things to metabolize the chemicals out of their body. But then we come along and say, that's naughty. That's bad. You shouldn't do that. And so we can't metabolize it. Anything that's not metabolized can only be stored. And like, I look at this, think of a diabetic, right? If a diabetic absolutely just binge ate sugar and had a huge rush of glucose in their body, but then didn't have the insulin to be able to metabolize it, what they're going to be very sick. And it's the exact same thing. And so, as adults, in all of our mental health courses, we've got 11 different mental health courses at the moment that go into micro things like complex PTSD, anxiety, depression, DPDR, like all different things. But we start with a foundation because if we don't have this fundamental understanding of the mind, the brain, the chemicals of emotion, our relational experiences, we cannot overcome it. And knowing somatically, how can I, as an adult, process the chemicals that I have suppressed and stored in my body that are making me so sick in all of those other systems as an adult? How can I safely release that and metabolize it, all the stuff from the past? And then what can I do in the now moments for the rest of my life so that I can actually metabolize things as they come up rather than store it?
Mhm.
And that is so fundamentally important.
Mhm. So how do we work on all of those stored toxins?
Yeah. So I look at it again as a multi-dimensional approach. So in our work, we do a lot of mind body work. So kind of things like, if you imagined a situation and you feel the tension in your body, you might feel like just to that imagined scenario, tightness in the chest or the lump in the throat or the nausea in the stomach. That's sort of suggesting to me that there is unprocessed emotion, that there is energy stored and that kind of thing. So we use a lot of mind body modalities specifically to process that, but also somatic work. So even just recently, I could feel in my body, I get this heaviness down the back of my arms here. That's how I know I'm in a freeze response. It's like my arms feel like lead. And I could feel all of this stored energy and molecules of emotion in my body. And so doing things like wood chops, literally shaking your body, doing all these somatic exercises, stomping your feet, punching the mattress on the bed, which is all the stuff that as a toddler we weren't allowed to do.
Yeah.
But now doing it in a safe, confined space where it's, socially acceptable. I'll take myself to my bedroom and do those things in a way that doesn't have to splash paint on everyone else, but it's my responsibility to metabolize the things that I'm feeling in my body. But if I don't process it, I'm going to project it.
Mhm.
And I'm going to project it by screaming at my kids, or shutting down with my husband, or being unkind, or it's going to project somehow behaviorally. And so again, reverse engineering that, we talk about life being the diagnostic tool
Mhm.
for what is unprocessed within us. And if I have snapped it at my kids, then rather than shaming myself, bringing curiosity and going, whoa, what was going on for me just then? Because I just went into a fight response, but there was no threat. My kids were just clearly overstimulated and needed some support and co-regulation. But I went into a fight response instead of being able to be present with them and meet their needs. What was that? And then being able to process, if it's something from the past, process that. If it's something that I was overstimulated, being able to process the chemicals that are in my body first, so that then I can be that present, safe energy for them to co-regulate. So yeah, there's somatic work, mind body work, there's in the moment stuff, there's out of the moment stuff.
Yes.
And we go through all of it because it has to
Yeah.
be all of it.
Yeah, yeah, you're making me think that I need to do more of there's a thing that my bonus daughter and I do. So we don't say step in my family, we say bonus because we try to look at it a little bit more positively. And
Yeah,
so she's 16, and there have been times that she was so angry before and she wanted to scream. And I'm like, so grab a pillow, put it in front of your face, and scream into it. And there were a
yeah,
couple times that we did that together because she thought it was silly. And
yeah,
I'm like, I'll do it too. I'll do it with you. And I grabbed a pillow and we both
yeah.
screamed into the pillow. And I said, now how do you feel? And she's like, that was kind of fun. Can we do it again? I'm like,
Yeah,
yes, let's do it again. Um,
yeah.
so that just kind of makes me think that we should probably be doing that kind of thing more often.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. I got called down to my son's old school before we changed, and they said, oh, he's completely shut down. He's not, he was in a complete freeze state. And they called me. I drove straight down there, and he was so angry. He was raging. But they were trying to talk to him and rationalize with him. And he was nonverbal by this point. He could not even speak. The front of his brain's completely shut down. And I could tell by the energy, like it was a tangible energy when you walk in through the room. It's like he was like this, he was fully tensed, and I could see that he felt angry. And I said to him, do you feel rage right now? And he said, yes. And I said, I want you to do this. Make a fist, squeeze as hard as you can, squeeze, 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 and let it go. And I said, do you need to do it again? He said, yes. I said, let's go, squeeze, 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 squeeze his whole body. And it only takes 90 seconds to metabolize the chemicals of an emotion. And so within 90 seconds of me arriving, seeing the state of my child by being able to interpret his nervous system, the fact that he was absolutely being flooded with chemicals, but not a single adult in their room knew what to do with those chemicals to support him to move through it, was really scary.
Mhm.
And they looked at me like, first of all, how did you know that's what he needed? Second of all, how did you know to do that? Like, that was unbelievable. And I said, he's an animal. So are you. Imagine how different your life would be if instead of feeling like you had to suppress it, shut it down, push people out, shame yourself for feeling, you actually just responded to the feeling and the chemicals through self-awareness and having the right tools in the toolbox. Everything changes.
Mhm.
It's very sad
Mm. Yeah,
that we're never taught this.
we are not taught that. My youngest child has autism. And I used to get called to his school all the time because he would be raging. Something would trigger him, and he was to the point where you cannot rationalize with him when he's like that. And they would try to rationalize with him. And I'm like, just
Yeah.
give him time to calm down, because afterwards, when he's calm, then you can talk, and then he can
Mhm.
apologize for things that he did, but he cannot metabolize that in the moment. He can't think about it. You cannot have those conversations. And it took a long time before we finally got him to a point where they would listen and give him that space because people
Yeah.
were always trying to get into space.
Yes.
I wish I would have known that part of just having him like squeeze because he would take his rage out on everything around him rather than
Yeah.
just trying to do that whole uh flex and then relax.
Yeah. It's so powerful. Oh, it really hurts my heart. This is why we went to online course delivery. And previously, our whole entire business was live delivered by me. But the limitations were we had to cap numbers every single time. Because it was live delivered, it required my constant time. So the price was so much higher. And I kind of cracked it at the end of last year and just went, everyone needs this. Like the world would be a better place if everyone were to understand this and could implement this and execute this in their workplaces, in their homes, in their lives. Because if everyone could understand this stuff, the world becomes a better place. We see people who are struggling and we respond to their need instead of seeing people who are bad or naughty and respond to their behavior. That first and foremost creates compassion and understanding and loving kindness and so much more. And I look at it and go, how would the world be different if we could respond to someone who's going through a difficult moment with loving kindness and compassion rather than being in trouble or being shamed or things like that? That alone is life-changing.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. So that said, so tell me more about your course. You were kind of starting to talk about it a little bit before. You've got lots of different sections that go through it. What does it look like for somebody that would want to take this?
Yeah, so we start with the foundations, as I said. We've got things like understanding the basics of a nervous system. There's no exam at the end. So I have to very much, it's actually funny because when I was recording this, the camera that I used had a max record time of 30 minutes just because of file size. And so that was very good for me because I had to be disciplined because when I start talking about teaching and I can just get lost because I love it so much and I get so excited about the content. So I had to really peel it back and go, what is the bare minimum that people, everyday people, need to know without having a formal education in neuroscience, without having a formal education in psychology or behavioral science? What's the bare minimum that people need to know to just be able to be equipped and empowered human beings? So the foundations course is for every single person. It doesn't matter. I call it flavor, whether it's anxiety, depression, perfectionism, burnout. It doesn't kind of matter in that respect. This is the stuff that every human needs to know because every human has a nervous system, every human has a mind, and every human has to relate with and to themselves and others. So that's the foundational stuff that we include in everything. But then how it kind of works is when you buy the course, you get the foundations plus one of the specializations. So it might be anxiety or it might be depression, like whatever someone's major issue is. And then all the others become available as you want it or need it basis. So all that foundation is laid. And then in the specialization, say for example, in the anxiety course, I can't remember if it's 3 or 4 additional lessons on top of the foundations course, but those lessons go into the absolute nitty-gritties of understanding anxiety, of understanding their lived experience, of understanding what's coming up for them, because anxiety is about threat and fear. So if I have a fear of letting someone down, if I have a fear of judgment, if I have a fear of not being good enough, if I have a fear of rejection or abandonment, then all of these fears are going to be activating my amygdala. And if you've done the foundations course, you know exactly what that is and you know how it relates to the hippocampus. So we it's scaffolded so that people are empowered to know exactly what's happening in their body and exactly what how to meet the needs that are coming up. So not only do we process any maybe um, mistaken or distorted fears based on past experiences, like, is it actually a threat if someone disagrees with me? It's not really. Is it actually a threat to me if someone thinks, something I'm saying is silly? No. And so, wouldn't it be nice if I could just recognize that that's their opinion? They're entitled to it. I can get on with my day and not have to carry the heaviness of their opinion in my day. That would be so beautiful, wouldn't it?
Mhm.
And so it's leading people through those experiences about, first of all, we take them through a journey of diagnosing what those fears are. Like, what are the fears that suffocate you and cause your nervous system to go into that fight and flight? And then let's speak truth into those fears. If you didn't have to be afraid of rejection, then how would you show up differently? What would you say no to that right now you're saying yes to? How would you honor yourself and love yourself in a more wholesome way? And so those specialization courses are really about, like I said, depression is about, sorry, anxiety is about fear. So that's really focused on trying to understand the fears that are affecting someone's life. Depression is more of an overload of unprocessed emotion across the board. It could be sadness, grief, fear, hurt, shame, guilt. So we explore those and then process all of the emotions from kind of the past. Each thing is really different depending on the context of how does this manifestation come up and sort of come about. And then based on what we know, how can we support you to move through that so that it's not stealing your life every day?
Mhm. Do you work with people then to help them figure out which one of those specialized routes would be best for them? Or is it
Yeah,
happening?
so the one thing that I find is that most people know what their biggest problem is.
Mm.
So most people know that they experience anxiety. Most people know that they feel depressed or that they're a perfectionist or they're feeling burnt out or have ADHD or symptoms of. So I feel like things like TikTok and Reels and social media has made that a lot easier. Like that does our job for us because I'm not here for clinical diagnoses. If someone resonates and feels depressed, I don't care if the doctor tells them that they are. I just want them to go, hey, if you feel depressed, this is going to help you to understand what's happening for you right now. So we have like a questionnaire that touches on each of these things and helps people to maybe identify what their priorities are. Because in my experience, people generally don't just have one thing, it's manifesting across multiple different ways. And so we have kind of like it's kind of like a survey, a questionnaire that helps people and just prioritizes going, okay, clearly anxiety is your biggest issue right now. Let's deal with that. And then we'll deal with the complex PTSD or childhood trauma because that's showing up in your relationships or in, other areas of life. So we do help people to kind of triage those issues, but in my experience, not everyone wants to go really deep.
Mhm.
If people could just do life without feeling suffocated by anxiety, if people could just do life by being able to get out of bed and not be so drowned under by depression, not everyone wants to go really deep and have the most healthy, wholesome relationships and, evolve and grow into their highest and best self. They just want to be able to do basic life without feeling rubbish.
Mhm.
So we meet people where they're at.
So not everybody wants to self-actualize, get to that top level of
No,
Maslow's hierarchy.
believe it or not, no. And that was such a shock to me because I look at it and go, oh my gosh, guys, our comprehensive course, I ran a program for nearly 5 years. It was 30 hours over 10 weeks. It was intense learning, healing, processing. And it wasn't based on one specific thing, like anxiety or whatever. It was about self.
Mhm.
It literally was the course for self-actualization. But I was so disappointed when I realized not everyone wants that. Like some people just want to feel a bit less crap.
Mhm.
And I have to be okay with that. So let's just create the resources that's going to help people live their desired life. But I also think that self-actualization only really becomes possible when you have access to a future that you actually want to live for, rather than feeling like you're just staying alive until you die.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
no, it's a
So
shock.
I love that not feeling like crap a little bit. Yes, that is very true. So very true. I think that is most people, unfortunately. But yeah. So what kind of results are you seeing from doing it this way rather than doing all the in person that you did?
Honestly, it has not made a difference because the whole entire thing, if I'm working with someone one on one, I take them on a journey. And I take them on a journey based upon my knowledge, my intuition, my best practice. the courses are set up to be a journey. So the workbooks have questions that lead people, and I call it, it's not just a course where we just give information to give people an education. I call it revelation for transformation, because the questions in the workbook are really inviting people to explore what am I afraid of? Like, what do I have a fear of rejection? Where does that show up in my life? What does it stop me from doing? How would my life be different if I wasn't so scared of someone abandoning me if I did something that was right for me, you know? So it is about that journey. And as long as people are actually willing to confront those questions and sit with it, then the results are no different whatsoever. But one of our survival mechanisms for some people is to just go super surface level and be like, nah, I can't see that anywhere, because they're not willing to go deep. So, as with anything, there is that level of self responsibility to create the time and space. It's not something to just tick off as a tick box and go, oh, well, I did the course, it didn't work for me. But then I would ask to see a workbook. So we have whole entire scaffolded support systems around that. So we have online we call them co-study times. So obviously people are studying and at different stages of courses themselves, but they can sign into Zoom and actually have a time, a timetabled time that they've got to show up. They get rewarded for showing up. They have community and connection live when they show up. They get to talk about what their mind-blowing revelation was. They get to share what their intent is, how they're applying it. And so from different courses, people can all show up at the same time, which gives community. And we also have an online community. There's just a peer-led one that's free for anyone who's ever done anything of ours. But then also we have our paid communities where I do live coaching. So in our personal development one, it's fortnightly live coaching. And again, that's where people can just go deeper. If they have those questions, if there is a block, if they're not able to see it themselves, then that's where we actually dig that bit deeper. And the professional development one's really interesting because this is not just about self, it's about other.
Mhm.
Because personally, we have to be able to lead ourselves and explore what's coming up for me. But as a leader or as a parent, which is also leadership, um, we have to then be able to interpret what is coming up for them
Mhm.
and how do I respond, which is a whole other ballpark. It's very different.
Yeah, being able to think about yourself is one thing, but being able to think about other people, that's a whole nother thing. And my kids and I were
Yes.
actually just talking about that whole leadership position the other night because we were talking about what school teaches you to do. And we got onto the topic that school really teaches you to be a good employee. It doesn't teach you to be a leader. That's not what it's intended to do.
Yeah.
And my youngest pointed out that, yeah, and like, you have to choose to take the leadership courses. And one of the kids said something about that not everyone is going to be leaders. I'm like, no, that's not the truth. You don't have to be in a leadership position to be a leader.
Yeah.
And
We lead ourselves, we lead our
yeah,
families, we lead people, we lead our friendship groups every single second of every day.
yeah, yeah.
It is
We lead
so
by our
true.
example that we give. So you don't have to be in a leadership position to be a leader. So learning to work with other people in that way is so important too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. I hear you on that. Oh man, speaking my language.
Yeah,
Preaching. Are we preaching to the choir? Is
we
everyone
are.
who's listening to this just going, yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. Because if you're not, you probably turned it off a long time ago.
Very true. Very true. I feel like I could probably talk to you all day long, but we are coming up to the end of your time. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about your courses through the Remind Institute or anything else like that?
Yeah, we are on every social media platform as Remind Institute. I have my own page, which is just Ashleigh Moreland. That's less about our actual pillars and our actual work and more about me just sharing my soul. So sometimes I have a rant, sometimes I share, like, based on my own lived experiences. Just recently, I actually was super close to burnout, and I had this revelation of one of the biggest risk factors for me for burnout is conflict of priorities that all matter to me. So my family matters to me. I love my work. My work matters to me. There were so many things that really mattered to me. but I felt like I had to choose one. And so sharing about that, that's where people can see, I guess, the behind the scenes of some lived experience. But yeah, our website's just www.re-mind.institute. People can find us there, but anywhere really. So
Awesome. Awesome. And you sent me some of your socials. I will include all of those in the show notes as well so
yeah,
people can find
amazing.
you easily. As we wrap up today, any last words of wisdom that you want to leave our listeners with?
I just want to say, don't give up. Like, don't give up because for every time I wanted to give up, it was I want to say resilience, that's probably stubbornness of just pushing through that last little bit. And I can see every time I wanted to give up, I was so close to breakthrough. And so if you imagine that just on the other side of whatever you're experiencing, there is breakthrough, it's worth it. Hang in there. It's worth it.
Mhm.
And if you do need support, find it, whether that's with us or anyone. Find the person that resonates and trust your full body yes. Because if you're listening to something, reading something, watching something, and your body responds with a yes and a resonance of agreement, and like you almost can just perceive truth in that, then follow that. Start trusting your intuition and let it lead you for the path that's not laid yet.
Mhm. Mhm. Spoken by a true overcomer herself. So from
Yeah.
from one overcomer to another. Thank you so much for being here today, Ash.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Mhm. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Brain Wellness, the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to subscribe, like, and share this with others to help me continue on with my mission to help people live healthier, happier lives. Go to www.brainwellnesssolutions.com to see what I'm up to and get links to all the social medias there. See you next time.